State University System's Board of Trustees. So a lot for y'all to ask about in a bit. We'll start with some prepared questions and then open it to y'all about halfway through. So Sophia can kick us off with the first question.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time and you coming out here. We're very excited to have you here. There's so much work of yours to cover, so we're going to try to cover some of that in our prepared questions. But I wanted to ask you first a little bit about your memoir. So just kind of setting the stage for the audience, there's an estimate of 11 to 16 million undocumented people in the United States, and 1 in 7 Asian immigrants are estimated to be undocumented.
Can you repeat that part? 1
in 7 Asian immigrants are estimated to be undocumented. We often don't see undocumented people on TV as public figures, just really represented in so many spheres of our life. And so in your memoir, Dear America, which we have copies of floating around if anyone wants to take a look at them, you discuss the societal expectations for undocumented people to stay under the radar, pursue low-wage labor, invisible labor, as well as conform to heteronormative standards to achieve this idea of Americanness, as you talk about in your book. So despite all these expectations that were pushed upon you in
Great. First off, a couple of things. One, thank you so much for having me. Maraming salamat, as we say in Tagalog, for having me. I was so thrilled that there's a group called Kaibigan. Not an easy word to pronounce. So I'm just happy that there's a group here. And then to thank, is it Anna? Did I pronounce it right?
If you're Filipino, people say Anna.
Okay, that's the accent. Sometimes my accent literally just comes out. And I have not been as visible. I used to go on TV quite a bit. I used to go on TV actually with Dr. Carlson. But I just haven't in the past few years, just because it's hard sometimes being like a professional undocumented person, and I have stuff to do, right? Like my undocumented status is not, this is a governmental condition. It has nothing to do with my talents and my skills. But after the election on Tuesday, I was texting with Joy Reid. Joy, I've known Joy for almost 20 years, a dear friend, has an MSNBC show and was like, Jose, you need to go on TV. You need to actually be visible right now. So I did. So I emailed you all, I think my agent did, and was like, hey, can I film? Can we move this 30 minutes later so I can go live on TV? While I just literally was live on TV with the chalkboard as my backdrop, sitting in this chair like 30 minutes ago. So thank you for accommodating the schedule and for having me here. So I want to say that. The second thing is, I heard of Northwestern when I was a sophomore in high school, which was 1997. Oh my God. You probably were not born yet. But anyway, so I heard about the school, and at that point I had found out already that I was undocumented. Because like people start looking at schools, right? Like SAT, PSATs. And then I found out pretty shortly afterwards that because I'm undocumented, I couldn't apply for financial aid. So all of a sudden, all these schools in my list was like off the table. So this is a very roundabout way of saying I'm happy to be at Northwestern, even though this is not a school that I could have attended, in my college career. This is a prestigious school. You have one of the best journalism programs in the country. So I'm happy to be here. So. Now, to your question. By the way, I didn't want to read these questions ahead of time, so I don't know what you were going to ask. What it's been like. So I fell into journalism. I just a little bit quick bio. So born in the Philippines, got here when I was 12 in 1993, and then found out I was undocumented 4 years later. In 1997, and those 4 years before I found out was really amazing. Because I was new here and everything was so new, right, in the Philippines. And I remember, I don't know if you know anything about this, but Tanya Harding, do you know who that person is?
Yes, yeah.
So one of the first things I saw on TV was like, what are these people doing spinning on the ice? And the Philippines is a tropical country. Like there's no ice. I don't think I ever wore a jacket in the Philippines, because it's hot. It's like Florida. It's like being in Miami. So I was like, what are they doing on the ice? So I just kind of like started watching that. And everything I knew about America was through all the media I consumed, right? And I'm Filipino, and all of a sudden I was Asian, right? All of a sudden I'm like, wait, what is this Asian American thing? And in the Philippines, any Filipino will tell you, we're obsessed with like Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and Janet Jackson, right? I think when I was growing up, I Will Always Love You as a karaoke song was being sung inappropriately by like 8-year-olds who could like do the bridge on key, ready to go, right? So I did not know that Whitney Houston was black until I got here. Because in the Philippines, she was just American, right? And then Michael Jackson was really confusing. Because I was like, wait, what? What's happening? And then the popular song in the Philippines was Black or White. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. I don't know if you remember that song. And there was a music video with this guy named Macaulay Culkin, the Home Alone guy. And, the whole video was like multicultural, ethnic, ambiguous America. And then I was like, well, Michael Jackson was black? But is he white? I don't know. So race was from the very beginning for me probably the biggest confusion. And back then, it was the library, it was like, because of what I was consuming, I wanted to be a film director. I wanted to actually there's a guy named Mike Nichols, he was a film director and stage director. He actually went to the University of Chicago. And he made a movie called The Birdcage, which is, I don't know if you've seen it, it's a great movie. So I wanted to be that. I was like, oh, let me be Mike Nichols, because I found out he was an immigrant, came here when he was 7. And then when I found out I was undocumented, I was like, well, shoot, what do I do now? And then my English teacher said, I asked too many annoying questions. I should be a journalist. And then I found out that when you're a journalist, when you're writing as a journalist, you get a byline. So my naive 17-year-old's justification was, oh, if I'm here illegally with no, proper documents, well, what if my name was on the paper? How can they say I'm not here if my name was right there? Using semicolons and em-dashes and commas. And so being a journalist, being a writer, was a perfect way of being visibly invisible. Right? I'm here, I wrote the article. And so I did that from 17 to 30. That was I was, this book is structured lying, passing, hiding, right? So I just lied and passed and hid my status from 16 to 30. And journalism in a way was a perfect way of it was also a perfect way to be distant from myself, right? I grew up, I'm kind of an old school journalist where objectivity, you're not supposed to be the story. You're supposed to write the story and not be the story. Especially for white people. That's a big thing, right? Because white people can afford to be objective. And that's an overgenerality what I'm saying, but especially men that ran the newsrooms, white men, straight white men that run the newsrooms can afford to say, I'm objective. What rights don't you have? And I, as a gay man, because that's the other thing too, so you kind of ask this a little sideways, but let me just answer sideways. My grandfather, so they couldn't get me here legally because grandparents can't petition grandkids, right? So they smuggled me in. They paid somebody $4,500 to smuggle me. And they told me that the guy was my uncle. But I'm Filipino, everybody's an uncle. So I just assumed he was whatever. So then I get here, and then I found out, that they paid this person. And my grandfather's plan was, I'm here, I go to high school, and then after high school, which was enough education, I work under the table, which is what we do as undocumented people. And then in time, I'll find a woman to marry who's a U.S. citizen. Like that movie, The Proposal, right? And so my first real act of independence was to say to my Catholic, homophobic, Filipino grandfather, who's whose favorite karaoke song was, My Way by Frank Sinatra. My first thing was to say, oh, no, I'm not gonna do that, I'm gay. I was like, what? Like, I'm like gay, And so that saying to my grandfather that I'm gay was like my first way of saying, oh, no, like, we're not gonna lie anymore. It's enough that you lied to get me here, and now I have to lie about being here, and now you want me to lie to a woman so I can stay here? Like, when does the lying stop, right? And as you can imagine, back then, this was like 97, this was like pre-Ellen, pre-Will and Grace, it was tough. He actually kicked me out of the house. And then back then, there's this thing called AOL. Do you know what that is? It's like before the dating apps, they had like rooms. And so I went in those rooms with dial-up. And I found guys to talk to. And I actually put this in the book. Probably the hardest part to write in the book was befriending this older man. And I was not an attractive kid at all. I was like, whatever. And I wasn't attracting a lot of people, so I just went to whoever said yes. And I needed a place to stay. Yeah. By the way, nothing is off limits, clearly. You can ask me whatever you want.
Yeah, I'd love to dig more into that. You've mentioned before how you've had to come out in the sense of not only your sexuality, but also your documentation status.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little more to the interaction of being LGBTQIA+ undocumented in America.
Well, I think the framing is really important, right? Like, straight people don't have to come out. And I learned this from Toni Morrison. It was like one of my idols. The glove has to be always pulled inside out. So as far as I'm concerned, undocumented people, gay people, we're not coming out. We're just letting you in, right? I actually wish we didn't have to come out. I wish that being gay was not an issue. I wish that, thankfully in this country, it's getting better and better. Clearly we have a long ways to go with trans issues, right? Clearly there's still, especially under this presidency, it's fascinating to me that one of the most effective ads of the campaign was about pronouns. Because God forbid we call people what they want to be called, as if that's going to injure you. And as an undocumented person, I wish I didn't have, when I started this journey of coming out as undocumented, I was 30. And I remember saying to myself, and Marcelo just reminded me, because I've been doing this now for 13 years, I did something at Oberlin in 2013. I actually thought I'd come out as undocumented, I'll do it on the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine, which is like a big thing. You get on the cover of Time magazine, you make a documentary that airs on CNN, and then I'm done. I'll do this for like 2 years, and then I'm going to go back to my career. Because what I really wanted to do was be the first non-white person to edit the New Yorker. I thought that was like, the New Yorker, the magazine with no photos, like that. I was like, let me the magazine that, when I was a kid, I was like, what's irony? Oh, that's my life. I'm like, what is ironic? What is this? Like, what are these cartoons? Are they supposed to be funny? $10, $15 words that nobody uses. I thought that was, so my plan was, I'll come out as undocumented, and then I'm going to go back to my career. And here I am 13 years later, because I was naive enough to think that if you want to change people's perception of something, you do those quote unquote mainstream things, like the New York Times, Time Magazine, CNN. And the reality is we don't live in that country. This election, by the way, I think really proves the death of quote unquote mainstream media. There is no mainstream media. For some people, Joe Rogan is mainstream media. What is that podcast? Call her
Daddy?
Oh my God, is it Daddy?
Call her Daddy with Alex Cooper?
Wait, my niece was, so Call Her Daddy. So that's a really popular, I've not listened to it. Andrew Tate. I was actually really convinced that this man was an actor. I was like, this can't be real. Like, is this guy real? And then his brother, I was like, yo, what kind of bro weird. So, and as somebody who kind of grew up, and in some ways made a mistake of praying to the altar of like the East Coast media elite, I thought to be American, I had to infiltrate that. You know, I thought like, you know, be a Washington Post reporter, write for the New Yorker. I thought like once you infiltrate that very Ivy League white bubble world, that you would be accepted. I was definitely wrong. And I think in some ways this election cycle really proves to us that there is no center when it comes to the media. You are the media. And people's livelihoods and freedoms is directly proportional to how ignorant and indifferent you are. Right? We've elected a president because they've created a media ecosystem where facts, context, data don't matter. Now, you can say that's really depressing what I just said, but I actually think it's also exciting. I think it's also exciting, I mean, I don't say this much, but I don't like using the word envious, but let me think of another word. I wish I were a journalist right now in journalism school or studying journalism, because I think it's really exciting. You all get to create what it's going to be, right? Like, is that story better told in a podcast than an article? Is that story better told as like a 5-minute YouTube video that comes with a list? You know, like the story is going to ask you, what is the most effective way to tell this thing? Right? And then what's your distribution strategy? And then, are you only talking to people who already think what you do? Right? Am I only, like, you know, is my audience undocumented gay Filipinos? I don't know how many undocumented gay Filipinos, I don't know. But is that like my audience? Right? Like, so meaning, if you're not undocumented gay and Filipino, you don't know what this is. No, I don't believe that, because Shakespeare wrote all of it already, and he probably stole it from somebody else. Stephen Sondheim wrote all of it already, meaning what we're talking about is the human condition, right? And you don't have to be undocumented gay Filipino to know what it means to be human, and to know that we all need to feel seen, and that we all need to be free.
I think there's so much of that I really want to unpack and say with. But I think one of the points that resonated with me the most was when you were talking about how there's no more mainstream media and how that election, this past election cycle has.
Do you all agree with me, by the way, or am I talking out of my mouth? Okay.
I think. Well, I'm going to ask another question that kind of builds off of that. Yeah. So I do think like there's a really big point to be made where, I mean, I'm just thinking about, you know, how surprised I think so many liberal and democratic people were that Trump won the election, and like not just won, but like in a landslide, like not just the electoral college, but like the popular vote by 5 million votes.
5 million votes.
5 million votes. You know, like
including 1/3 of all people of color. And by the way, even that term, people of color, yeah. I think we have to stop using it. I think we actually need to get specific. Because all my black friends are like, I don't want any more people of color. I'm black. And clearly, if you look at the thing, black people, in many ways, are the truest Americans. They know what's at stake. They've always known what's at stake. They've always known that it was a lie. Right? And now the question is, how do we make sure that our aunties and our uncles and our grandparents who came here, right? When you come to, this is what this next book that I'm finishing is. This next book that I'm finishing is going to get me in so much trouble. I think they're really going to deport me. They really are. They're going to be like, this guy is so crazy. But look, I'm a journalist. Data is important. I have all the data you can possibly want. This country right now is home to 47 million immigrants. Total. 11 million of whom are undocumented. I think that's an undercount, by the way, the 11 million. I'm glad that you said 11 to 16, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, that might be the first time I've heard that, which is, I'm happy to hear you say that. Because I think we've undercounted undocumented Asian, undocumented Black, and undocumented white people. If I just counted all the undocumented white people I meet at Starbucks that want to buy me a drink, it's already a lot of people. No, seriously, they like stop me, like, and the weirdest one happened at airports. The last one was in Charlotte at the airport. This guy kept looking at me, I'm like, why is he looking at me? this is, he was cute. I was like, but you don't want to like do that. I was like, why is he looking at me? And then finally he goes, oh, I read your book, I'm undocumented from Germany. I didn't know he was German. I couldn't, he was ethnically ambiguous in a way. But yeah, so he was like, let me buy you. I'm like, no, I can afford my copy, but thank you. And then he was like, he overstayed his visa, and then he feels really guilty that he gets the pass.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's more. So 47 million. In the next 50 years, 88% of the population growth of this country is going to come from the 47 million immigrants. 88%. I don't know what's happening, but white people are just not having as many babies as they used to have. Right? Latin people, Asian people, black immigrants, 1 out of 10 black people in the country is a black immigrant. If actually if it was not for black immigrants, the black population would have decreased. Right? So in this country, when I immigrated here in '93, the country was 2% Asian, 8% Latin, and 13% black. 31 years later, what is it now? 8% Asian, 20% Latin, and 13% black. So now, given what just happened in this election, the question is, when the 47 million immigrants and their kids and their grandkids come, you come to America and you make a choice. Do you go black or do you go white? Whiteness and blackness are ideological. Not just physical, ideological, right? And I think this election has proven what that means. And I hope though, that we are gonna learn, especially as the data comes more and more. I was watching Nevada very closely because the Filipino vote matters in Nevada, right? The largest APAC group in Nevada are Filipinos. 55% of all Asian people in Nevada are Filipinos. And I just heard that unfortunately, more than 50% of the APAC vote in Nevada went to Trump. You've heard about Latin people, right? And especially the Latin male vote. Mind you, as somebody, I've been traveling the country nonstop for like 13 years. None of this was surprising to me. I was actually probably the only person in my group, because again, I used to be a political reporter. When Trump announced he was running for president, at the time I was making a documentary called White People. It's on YouTube, check it out. And the document, it's a 1 hour documentary, well, 45 minutes, the commercials, 45 minutes, just a documentary. I went around the country asking young white people what it means to be white, because the country's gonna get less and less white, right? I did that all over the country. And when Trump announced he was running, I said to my friends, oh, no, like this is real. And they're like, no, he's a sideshow. I'm like, no, he's the entree. He's not a side, he's not an appetizer, this is the entree. Because I've been talking all across the country, and you really see, specifically white people, back then, 10 years ago now almost, the reaction to whenever I talked about immigration, the question was, why are they talking in Spanish? Like, why are they, I remember whenever I visit a town, I go to the Target or the Walmart to see if there's an ethnic food aisle. Like, that's when I know what I'm up against, right? And like, if I'm like in Montgomery, Alabama, and there's no Asian food aisle at the Publix, I'm like, all right, fine, right? Whenever I talked about immigration, the question was always, well, are they going to replace us? That was the subtext. And Trump really capitalized on that. And in this country right now, I bet you, if we were to talk to anyone, they could tell you the difference between Thai food, Chinese food, and Vietnamese food, and cannot tell you the difference between Vietnamese culture, Thai culture, and Chinese culture. I still have to keep explaining to people why I'm Filipino and why my name is Jose Antonio Vargas. Because sometimes I'm like, people make me feel bad. I don't speak Spanish. And I'm like, I speak Tagalog, that's a lot. I wish I spoke Spanish. And then I explain, we were colonized. I was doing an event in North Carolina a few years ago, and it was a Tea Party event. Because I think it's really important to talk to people who don't agree with you, right? So I was doing this event, and I said, there are 2 million Filipinos in California. 2 million Filipinos in California, okay? There are more Filipinos in California than there are people in New Hampshire, Delaware, and Rhode Island. So I said this. And this elderly guy at the back was like, why are there so many of you here? So clearly he hasn't had lumpia, right? And I said, sir, a big pause, because I was like, well, how do I respond to this? Sir, we are here because you were there. It's like, what are you talking about? We are here because you were there. You took us. 1898, Spanish-American War. Have you read Mark Twain? Mark Twain was up against this stuff. He was the same year you took Puerto Rico, you took us. We were your window to the Orient because you wanted a base for your military. We owned the Philippines? Well, not anymore, sir, but kinda. Right? Kinda. Right. So, in many ways, this country, and when you're in the South, I was just in Alabama last week. I'm going back on Saturday because I'm finishing reporting on this book. This country has barely scratched the surface dealing with black people and the history of black people in this country. Like, they're still litigating the civil. In Alabama right now, if you're a student in Alabama, public school student, you are not taught the civil rights movement. Right? The birthplace of the civil rights movement does not teach the civil rights movement in public schools. They haven't even figured that out. What do you think they're going to think about Filipino American History Month? Chinese Exclusion Act. Right? The racism that Indian people face when they got here. They haven't even told the story of Ellis Island to bother what Angel Island was about. Right? To me, the biggest untold story of American history is the Mexican-American War. The Mexican-American War, to me, is the biggest untold story of America. Certainly, the Civil War, we talk about it a lot, right? But the reality is this country took Mexico. The reality is, the idea of the border crossing Mexicans. The reality is right now in this country, Mexican people in this country are what the Germans were in the 19th century, the dominant ethnic group. We sell more salsa than ketchup. We have more taquerias than burger. I have all these numbers. We have more taquerias than burger joints. And yet, the racism that Mexican people face is just atrocious. Embarrassing. And when I think about it, I wonder, The Bluest Eye is like one of my favorite books. It's Toni Morrison's first book. And she wrote the book because she said she wanted to get to the interior of what happens when you're rejected. And it just makes me wonder, in California, for example, at the school system that that I'm a trustee of, 50% of our students are Latino, mostly Mexican, right? This country will get more Latino, specifically more Mexican. And the fact that we have used the term Mexicans and illegals interchangeably, and the media still does it. Did you notice during the election, they kept talking about the Latino vote and there was no Latino talking about it? Mm-hmm. I was like texting all my friends, all the bookers. I'm like, I'm so sorry, there's 65 million of them. Can't you find one? But there's a lot, okay? I don't want to hear non-Latinos talking about Latinos. And Asian people, we're the world's majority people. 63% of the world is Asian. And you know who figured this out? Netflix. Why do you think there's so much, Korean, Indian, Filipino content? They know, right? And yet in this country, we're Asian American, which I'm happy that we are, but that's the experiment, right? Chinese, Indians, Koreans, Filipinos, all these groups of people with, America is barely 250 years old. China is like how many centuries old, right? India, we're talking about just epic cultures, epic. And yet we come here and we're like, Asian, it's been so frustrating in this election because they keep leaving Asian people out. Mm-hmm. And it's so tiring. And you have to keep telling them, we are the world's majority people. And we're actually, the fact that we as Koreans, Filipinos, Chinese, Vietnamese are together, that's the experiment. That, I think, is exceptional.
Yeah, and I want to say, too, kind of going off of your point, I think you brought up a lot of really interesting points about the ways in which, Asian and Latino people have proximities to whiteness, but then also the ways in which, there's kind of a profound misunderstanding of these specific racial groups and then the ethnic groups and the histories as well, which I think kind of speaks to maybe some of the Democratic and liberal surprise, well, why are, Asian and Latino people increasingly voting for Trump as opposed to 2020? And I guess kind of, I would ask a question going off of that, like, what would you say to people, kind of like the people on the news channel that are scapegoating, immigrants, Latine, Asian immigrants, specifically non-white immigrants, that they're the reason that Vice President Harris lost the election,
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. One way I'll say too is, again, as somebody who was a political reporter, I covered the Obama campaign for 2 years and 2 months and 5 days. It was a long campaign. I will never want to do that again. And by the way, and that was pre-TikTok and like Instagram. I don't even know how you be a reporter and do all of that. I was busy reporting. I was like, wait, you want me to like make TikTok videos? Like, how do you even do that? Like, so Harris lost for many, many different reasons, right? However, as you pointed out, the scapegoating, what I'm still wrapping my head around, in California in particular, Filipinos and Indians and Chinese are like neck and neck in terms of the largest AAPI group, right? There are 700,000 undocumented people from India in this country. The undocumented Indians are actually the third largest undocumented population in the country by nationality. It's Mexican, either Salvadoran, Guatemalan, and then Indian. It used to be, 10 years ago, Chinese and Filipinos.
Yeah.
1 out of 7 Koreans is here without authorization, right? And then it's been fascinating how in this cycle, Vice President-elect's J.D. Vance's partner, Usha, is Indian, first generation Indian American from San Diego. And yet, this concept, no, because I've been tracking, no one has even connected the dots and written that story, right? And that's where the journalist in me it's been so frustrating this past 13 years, watching my colleagues in the news media be so irresponsible about not only immigration as an issue, but immigration beyond the politics of the border, right? Like, almost 45% of people who are here illegally came legally. They were on a plane, right? It's not like, they were like, I was on a plane, got here, was not inspected properly, and then clearly overstayed 31 years, right? But that conversation does not puncture the psyche of this issue. And sometimes I wonder if Asian people, again, when I first started doing this work, I'll never forget this, a bunch of Filipino American influencers, wait, I don't mean influencers like Instagram influencers, like, leaders, sort of leaders, said to me that I was embarrassing the culture. Because, at that point, I had already won like a part of this Pulitzer, and I was like, I guess I'm like the youngest Filipino American, whatever. So they were like, oh, like we're so proud of you, and now we're embarrassed. Like, why do you have to tell them? Like, you should. One woman said to me, this Doña, rich woman from the Philippines, right? She said to me, I just go back to the Philippines. They'll give you a TV show. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't want a TV show. Like, they were embarrassed that at that point, like the most prominent and documented person was Filipino. And I said, well, that's the problem. That's part of the problem. In our culture, undocumented is TNT, right? TNT. It stands for Tago ng Tago, which translates to hiding in hiding. You're supposed to hide. And then I actually think that's a metaphor for Filipino culture at large, right? The Spanish came, then the Americans came, right? And I think Filipinos are figuring out, what are we exactly? Where were we before they all came? Right? Like, what are we hiding? How do we and it's exciting though watching, especially since, Kaibigan sponsored this. It's been fascinating watching my nieces and nephews who are like your age, watching, and this is where, again, there's a lot of ills on social media, but there's also positives. I'm not sure this young generation of Filipino Americans would find each other if Instagram and TikTok weren't so prevalent. When I was growing up, being Filipino was something that you didn't, because you have to keep explaining it to people. Now people are just like waving it happily, proudly. wanting to speak Tagalog, like wanting to date other Filipinos. When I was growing up, you didn't do that. So that's been fascinating watching. And watching my nieces and nephews be so comfortable with it. And maybe that's part of the process of America. I wonder, maybe when the Germans and Italians and Irish came, is that what they went through too? By the way, I think the question I'm asking is really important because I think sometimes we so think that what's happening to Latin people and Asian people is so unique to us. This is America. Everybody goes through this process. And I don't want to think that we're any different than the Italians, Germans. The difference, of course, is they get to be this thing called white, right? And I actually think that's part of the beauty of this moment, is asking people, wait a second, like, well, were you before that, right? So when people talk about identity politics, to me, the biggest identity politics are white people. And the erasure and the invisibility and the kind of, in California where I grew up, 60%, if you counted Latino community, the APAC community, and the Black community, 67% of California is people of color. 67%. And yet the language, the minorities. Minorities to whom? Compared to what? Are we talking power structure? Are we talking money? Because if we're talking about money, yes, I get that. Although with Asian people, it gets really interesting. Because if you look at the top income earners, median household incomes, number 1, Indian Americans. Number 2, surprised the hell out of me, Filipinos are number 2. Did you know that? Who said, wait, it can't be right. I'm such a journalist. I was like, okay, wait. Second source, third source, where do we go? I was so surprised. I'm like, oh, well, all my aunties do have that purse, and that purse is really expensive. That purse is really expensive. And then when you look at the numbers, because it was Pew that came up with Black people, Black Americans, of course now, upper middle class, kind of, clearly there's more economic diversity in the Black community. But as a median, Black people are at the bottom of that list. And then when I asked Pew to give me all the different dates, since the 60s that they've been counting, Black people have been at the bottom. So then my question is, since we all just got here, right? If you're, especially if you're AAPI, if you got here post 1965, if your family got here, that's because of the Immigration Nationality Act, which is celebrating its 60th year next year. The act, by the way, that benefited Asian Americans and in many ways screwed Latinos, specifically Mexicans. Because back then, there was no quota for Mexicans. When this act was established, the quota system started happening. So while the country invited the rest of the world, including people from Asia, it limited Mexican people who can just walk in and out back then, right? Because of that act, that's why there's 22 million AAPI people in the country. And that act would not have passed if it wasn't for the civil rights movement. What I'm saying right now, do you get taught this in school? Did you know about this? Wait, this is Northwestern. I look at your tuition fee. What? We don't teach you this?
Asian American Studies classes.
Oh, okay, Asian, okay. Well, however, that's great. And at the same time, this is American history. So when our aunties and grandparents get to come to a country that already is what it was, that enslaved Black people helped build for free, what is that debt? And some people call it reparations, we can call it all the other, but there's that, the country already was what it was, right? And that's why I get so frustrated when people talk about meritocracy without having kind of the full arc of American history, right? And by the way, before you take another trip to Europe or the Philippines or Korea or China, go spend some time in Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, right? The legacy museums in Montgomery, Alabama is some of the best storytelling I've ever seen. Check it out. You can't be American without knowing what happened in the South and what is still happening in the South, right? And in some ways, I think that's the kind of present history that this country has not really faced. And I think I think of Asian Americans as bridges. I think our identity is a bridge. It's a bridge to Asia, it's a bridge to America, and I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we don't fall into a United States of amnesia when it comes to
Yeah.
really recognizing the history of the country.
Kind of as you're pulling on that transnational element of our identities, I kind of want to shift a little bit to something you mentioned earlier, how you're on the board of trustees.
Yeah.
On our campus, a lot of campuses, more attention has come to what the board of trustees even is, what they govern,
Oh, God.
transnational involvement, and what
Yeah.
role we as students have to affect that. So I guess from your perspective, when it comes to transparency, interaction between trustees and students, and the context of divestment maybe,
Big
if you
issue.
have, from your perspective as a trustee, what would you recommend to students?
So I was not, so again, I know, how many people here have heard of the California state system? Have you? Cal Poly, San Diego State, San Francisco State, it's 23 schools, almost half of, we're the largest 4-year public system in the country, right? 500,000 students, 1 out of 20 people in America has a degree from the CSU, 1 out of 20. We produce more teachers than any other system in the country, just of the big size of it. I wasn't gonna accept it because it's a big job. It's basically like a full-time job, because I have to be in trustee meetings every 2 months for 3 days. And by the way, it's a volunteer position, right? They give you like a stipend, which is nice, because you have to buy Pete's Coffee or Starbucks or whatever. So I said yes because I'm the first Filipino trustee, which is crazy, given that this is where most Filipinos go. And I'm the first undocumented trustee, and the system is home to 10,000 undocumented that we know of. So I said yes, 2 years in, it's 8-year term. I'll be 50 by the time I'm done with the term, with my term. Everybody moisturize. It's been probably one of the best educations I've ever gotten. Having the fiduciary responsibility for this public system. We had a lot of protests, right? We had a lot of protests during, it's still what's happening in Gaza, which is a genocide, and you can't, it is what it is, right? We can't call it what it's not, and it's a genocide. And we're watching it happen, right? However, it's been so frustrating because the protests have come with some violence. It's come with a lot of real, a lot of damage to buildings. And we're a public system. And so the thing that we've had to do is figure out how can we make sure that if you're a student, faculty, staff, you have the right to protest, as you do, and have your voice heard, while at the same time respect the school. Respect that not everybody agrees with you, and that everybody else has their opinion on this. And I think that's something we're still struggling with. In terms of transparency, we're absolutely transparent because we're a public system, right? So everybody knows what the presidents make, everybody knows, it's a huge, I think altogether $3 billion budget. Yeah, at one point they put me in the audit committee and I was like, oh my God, I can't, I don't know how to do this, So, however, as I was saying, I wonder, for example, do you go to the board meetings when they have the trustee meetings? Are they open to the public?
Oh, no.
Wait, what?
We don't even know who they are. We're not allowed to know who they are.
Wait, what are you saying?
We're not allowed to know who most of our trustees are.
Well, yes, we do. Yes, we do.
They don't publicize it. They don't want us to know.
No,
Wait.
It's not the form. The tax form is published on the website, so they have salaries and what they all make and list of trustees, but they don't tell us when they're meeting or how they're meeting or what they're talking about. So we know who's on the board, but we don't know what.
I'm sorry, did you say the trustees get paid?
Some of them get paid. Well, they don't get paid anything. It's like $0, but they have to publicize that it's $0.
Oh, yeah, because yeah, okay.
So like,
But-
this is really like what they get paid.
So has the news organization here done a deep dive on this? Because you all should know who they are.
They've tried. They're working.
Why are you, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, they're working on it.
Oh, you're working on it.
Yes, sure.
Amazing.
To be fair, we reached out to them before, but they live in these like huge towers in Chicago or in like Rebecca.
huge towers in Chicago.
So sometimes, radio silence and you can't even do your old-fashioned door knocking because
But again, as a trustee, I am responsible to the student. Like I got shish kebab. Oh my God. So I think it was like a year in, we had to vote to increase the tuition. And the undocumented students just went in. They were like, "You're a traitor. You're like my Instagram." And I did not realize that you could DM on Instagram until last year. I thought DMing was only for, this is how I'm aging myself. So I thought DMing was a Twitter thing. I didn't know it was an Instagram. Thankfully, my nephew Angelo was like, "Uncle, you have all of these unread DMs." So Angelo taught me how to do that. So now I'm seeing all of them. I probably shouldn't be seeing all of them. But yeah, I got completely dragged, right? Like, you sell out, and I'm thinking to myself, yo, like, I had to look at the numbers. It's either we raise your tuition or we close that school or we lay off. These are the numbers. These are the facts, okay? And I'm a trustee who happens to be undocumented gay and Filipino, but I'm not a trustee only for undocumented gay Filipinos. I have to look at the whole thing. And by the way, that's the hard thing about being a human being. Being a human being is really hard. You know why it's really hard? Is how do you stand straight? How do you own yourself fully knowing that you're not the only person in the room? Your voice is not the only ones that matter. Right? That citizenship actually requires community. Right? So that was really hard. And I had to explain. I had to be I did a thing. It was so interesting too, because some of them, of course, drag, because that's the thing, right? People can be so assertive in social media, but in person, they're like. So then I went to one of the events, and they got to know me, and then they asked for a Zoom meeting to apologize for being so rude publicly. And I said, I have no problem. You can call me whatever you want to call me, but let's be civil, and let's have an actual thing called conversation. There's a reason why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
That's a Filipino.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That is so, I know, but I am Filipino. Right? You're supposed to, listen, right? Not only listen to what you want to hear, but the stuff that you don't want to hear, right? So that's been a lesson. However, I am responsible and accountable to those students. And your trustees are responsible and accountable to you. Because you pay the tuition, and I saw what it is. It's a lot. Okay? So wait, so you're doing this study or this report?
well, there's a lot of moving parts to it.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. We did find that a lot of trustees give a lot of money. to
Oh yeah,
this
that's how a lot of them get it.
Oh, a political action committee that the school uses sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of.
Well, I think in this era, especially with with divestment, I think transparency and accountability is absolutely important. I think that ought to be a cornerstone of any community, public or private, right? Especially, by the way, when I went to college at San Francisco State University, my tuition was $850 a semester. Now, I'm sending somebody now, this student that I've been mentoring, it's about $4,000 a semester, which is, again, most of our students are first generation immigrant, that's a lot of money. But in comparison to some other schools, when I looked at what people charge at Stanford, I was like, what does that come with? Does that come with a house? What is it? Should college be this expensive? I don't know. I mean, sorry, I don't want to get into your business. You made your decision on that, and you figure that out, right? But in general, I just think an education is really what you make of it. And a degree doesn't give you the education. You actually give yourself that education, right? Although, given the prestige of this university, I'm sure that it's more than worth it. But you have to do that. That's actually not just up to the school.
We do want to be mindful of time and leave time for book
questions.
signing.
Oh,
So
book
I want
signings.
to open it up for a couple. How much time do you have?
Whatever you want.
Questions?
Again,
Okay.
you move my time, so whatever you want to do. I'm cool.
Okay. We can start over here.
And can you say your name
Yeah.
and then what you're studying?
Hi, my name is Kat. I'm actually a first-generation Filipino immigrant who's also studying journalism,
Oh, yay.
which is why I find you so inspiring.
Oh, thank you. How about Maria Ressa? She's way more inspiring.
Oh, I love Maria
She's-
Ressa too. But you're here, so.
Shade. Okay, sure.
I just wanted to ask, what do you think is the most important thing for young journalists to know and do moving into this new era of Trump?
Oh, okay. Before we move to the new era of Trump, which again is something to be clearly aware of, I think to be a journalist means right now is to how fluent are you going to be with all the mediums that you can work on and in, right? Again, it's so exciting, right? Like, have you done podcasting? How do you know how to edit a video? Do you know how to write like a long 2,000 word piece and the difference between that and what you post on Instagram? Like that. There's no substitute for being good. Now, mind you, like most of my stuff, I try to make sure that I'm not mediocre. I try, right? But so at least the trying and the aiming for excellence to me is really important. So like getting good first and getting the skills necessary to me is absolutely the first thing. And that means reporting. Oh my God, I was talking to a journalism school a few months ago, and I was so like aghast that, some of the students I was talking to, they think reporting is like lifting something online or like quoting Wikipedia. I'm like, wait a second, wait, what? No, like the most important part of Wikipedia is at the bottom, the sources, and nothing replaces reporting. I'm like religious. My only religion is probably reporting. Like I'm literally flying to Alabama because I need to get more information. And I can't Zoom my way through that. I need to go to Alabama, I need to smell it, I need to feel it, I need to actually like experience it, right? To know what I'm talking about. So that's the first thing for me. Now for the Trump era, I think what's really important is that we insist on facts, we insist on context, and as much as possible, make sure that there's a difference between having an opinion and being informed. I am getting really tired of opinions. I kind of want to I want to know what you know and what you don't know and what you ought to know versus I think. And here's the irony of getting older. The older I get, the more I feel like I know less. The less certain I feel about life. It feels like it's getting more gray. And when I was young, I was so certain. I was like, okay, this way. Damn, maybe it wasn't that way. So, right now we have a real crisis in mis and disinformation. A real crisis. And the media is not a slice of the pie, it's the whole pan. Like, let me repeat that. The media is not a slice of the pan, the pie is actually the whole pan. And that's why everybody, to me, media literacy is like number one. When I watch, oh my God, one of my my niece said to me, Uncle, your novel is being assigned at the school. Oh my God, wait, it's not a novel, it's a nonfiction book, Jenna. Like, novel is fiction. It's not fiction. Wait, how did you get through high school and not know the difference? Right? I was aghast. I was like, wait a second, Jenna, like what else don't we know? What else don't we know? What's a news article? What's an opinion? What's an op-ed? What's a feature story? Like these things are real things, right? Like these are real distinctions. And now I think everything just becomes content. Everything just becomes YouTube or stories on Instagram or whatever. Although I think I am going to surrender and give into TikTok. I am going to do that. I think I'm going to do like a TikTok eyebrow thing. I'll be like, I'll make it about eyebrows because I can't control them. I'm like, we'll just make it about eyebrows. Just make it about eyebrows. You all ask who you're going to pick.
I'll go ahead.
I'm Edward. I'm also a journalism student here and also studying education. So looking at the election and kind of the messaging on immigration, we know that Democrats usually tend to be on the losing end of that in the polls, and that's been the case this year. What do they need to look at if they're trying not to mess up again in 2 years and 4 years?
Well, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is both of these parties are responsible, they're both responsible for kind of where we are right now, right? I mean, clearly in terms of messaging, I mean, it was really painful for me when I was here for the DNC. I was in Chicago for the convention. And most of my friends were at the DNC doing the DNC stuff, and I was here reporting my book because I have a chapter in the book about the tension between the Latino community and the Black community in Chicago, right? The Latino community now is larger in numbers than the Black community, right? And there's just interesting tension happening. And it was fascinating being here during the DNC, and you have the vice president, who's the daughter, first generation American, the daughter of immigrants. And immigration was nowhere. I went to one DNC event, first day of the convention. This group called Forward.us, which Mark Zuckerberg founded, all about immigration reform and dreamers, Forward.us. I don't know how many millions of dollars Mark has spent, but he spent a lot of money. They booked the ballroom for like 1,000 people, right? First day. 10 people showed up. And to your question, I think we need to rethink the whole conversation when it comes. I would make an argument that in some ways, or some people have already made this argument, that the vice president felt that she needed to go to the right. She needed to be tough on the border. She needed to, you know, when she was talking about sanctuary cities, the Democrats knew that immigration was a losing issue, and for the Republicans it was a winning issue. And guess what? It is, right? So for me, given that the Democratic Party, specifically the leaders within it, House members, senators, right, are coming from immigrant families, I think what needs to happen is some truth-telling. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. For example, I'm really excited to read Barack Obama's second volume memoir, because the first one had nothing on immigration. I'm like, you know, and President Obama is one of the most just discerning, intelligent people. I've interviewed him a couple of times when I was a reporter. Just brilliant mind, right? And he's a writer, he's a real writer. So I'm waiting for him to talk about the 3 million people that got deported under his watch. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to how he talks about that. Because every single Latina and Latino in this country grew up during that era. And they remember, right? And the fact that Obama has yet to even own up to that. The Obama library is about to come up, and there's nothing on his immigration legacy. Right? Or the fact that Bill Clinton is responsible for the mess that we're in. Right? So I got here when I was 12. I haven't been able to leave. Right? I don't want to use the word stuck, but that's what it is. Right? I can't leave because of what Bill Clinton signed into law in 1996. Because if I leave, there's no guarantee they'll be allowed back. And I would face what's called a 10-year bar. Right? That's, Bill Clinton did that. Interestingly enough, the person that actually tried to do something on this was George W. Bush. And that didn't work. So to me, given that the country is going to get more and more immigrant, I think some real truth-telling that's beyond party. Now, let's look at the immediate. The immediate thing is, this is a winning issue. I actually think Fox News owe undocumented people money. Because what would they do without undocumented people? We're like content. Right? We're like literally, we're like the reality television show that never stops for Fox News. What else would they talk about? Like, I think we should sue them for defamation. Right? I'm getting to this point right now with the election of this president that, like, I think undocumented immigrants, I have paid so much taxes to this country. I mean, I should be a Republican. I paid so much taxes to this country. Right? Because I made money. So I pay taxes because, you know, we should, right? What is that thing called taxation without representation? I bought a house. I didn't know that I could, by the way. I didn't know that people like me could buy houses. We can't. The banks don't care. They just want the money. So my house in Berkeley is legal, and I'm not. I know this because I pay this thing called property taxes. I'm like, what the hell is that? I already paid my taxes, and I pay this twice a year. And I have no vote. I can't even vote for the city council, the library commission, or I called the mayor. I was like, yo, like, what is this? I'm in Berkeley. Aren't you like a sanctuary city? You know, like, silence on the line. Right? Did you all know that, by the way? Undocumented people cannot vote. Again, they've been so successful. What are we going to vote with? Here's another fact. only 16 states allow people like me to drive. Did you know that? So Texas, 1.8 million undocumented people. Is there a subway system in Dallas and Houston and Austin I don't know about? Florida, 1 million undocumented people. Thankfully, Illinois was actually, Illinois is actually a relatively, not relatively, it's a progressive state. You are the first Midwest state that allow undocumented people to drive. But guess what? Our licenses in the states that give us driving privileges can't be used anywhere else. So my California driver's license, like for example, I would have loved to have driven to Evanston myself. I have an Avis preferred membership, and I can't. Because my lawyers are like, if you get caught, if some rogue cop looks at your ID and it says federal limits apply, and this person is anti-immigrant, they're gonna know that that's a marked license. That's for the undocumented people or the illegally alien people. So yeah, but by the way, these are basic facts, right? But we have been so fed with so much mis and disinformation on undocumented people that I bet you most people don't even know these basic facts. And we elected the president twice because of it. And Elon Musk, oh my Lord in heaven. I'm actually getting to this point where let's before you want to deport me, can we go talk? I don't know, let's go talk. I'm curious about your skincare routine, yo. What is your skincare routine? It's fascinating to me that way. I just think he's an interesting, this how Elon, Joe Rogan, Andrew Tate, masculine, there's something fascinating happening with just bros that I'm fascinated by. And I don't know how it happened. And I don't know, I think we really need to look into it. Yeah. Okay.
With that, I think unfortunately we're gonna have to cut off, but if Jose has time and you want
I'm
to
gonna
stick
stay
around,
and I'm gonna
feel
sign the
free.
books.
I think we're gonna try to take a group picture. Us three will turn around, but before we do that, we have something small for you.
Oh, is it a green card? By the way, as you can tell, if I don't have a sense of humor, it's over. Right? So I have to laugh at this thing, or else it's too absurd.
I'll go to law school. I'll
Oh
work it out
wait,
for you.
what? Oh yay! Oh my God, my first ever. Can I now contact your trustees and be like, yo? I'm still not paying your tuition. It's too much, you all. It's too much, but it's okay. It's okay.
Okay,
All right.
I'd love if.
Yeah. How do we take a picture?
I think if someone here can take mine, and then we can switch. But also, really quick, I want to give a shout out to the local Chicago organizations that do a lot of work with undocumented immigrants, Filipino immigrants. If y'all know AFIRE, it's spelled A-FIRE.
Yes,
They
AFIRE.
do a lot of work.
Yes.
They do citizenship workshops if y'all want to volunteer. They do them monthly. Also, ISTER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. They have a lot of ways y'all can plug in. So, although a lot of the media about it is in California, they're here too. So please plug in beyond just listening tonight. So yeah, but if we could take the picture, we can.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
It's so amazing that you all are here, and it's so amazing that we live at a time when regardless of ethnicity and nationality, that the API community can organize and rally together like this, and clearly have non-API people in the room. So this is really amazing. So thank you. And thank you, Aiden. Apparently Aiden had this idea and texted you. So he flew in from New York. I was like, yo, that was a lot of pressure. So hopefully this was worth it. And thankfully somebody recorded it to be reminded of what I said. But yeah. Good. So what do you want to do this?
Move these chairs over.
Yeah, we can have them sit in the middle, and then we'll just take it this way. If people want to squeeze them maybe into the aisles too, from the side parts.
Taking it this way.
Oh, am I?
Stand up, you think? Or
Stand up.
Yeah. Hi, Gustavo. Thank you for recording this video. Babe, you want to say anything?
Hello. Hi,
Hi,
Gustasi.
Gustavo. Whoa! Gustaddy.
Is that gonna be in the live stream?
Gustaitai.
Y'all sit next to me.
Should we scooch in more?
I think we're okay.
We're okay.
Al, what do you think? Do we need to scooch in more?
Yeah. Can we fit, or do we need to like sit down in the middle?
Can they do the panorama thing?
You can see us? Okay.
I was at that meeting.
Okay.
Wait, can I lean on you?
Lumpia.
This is for me. Oh, I want to
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Very important.
Hi, Gustavo.